Oh, welcome back to the Schematic Mind Palace with your host, the True Party King, coming at you from Florida, Palm Beach area, with the lunar goddess here, yeah. Oh, yeah. We've been having such a good time. Sorry that my content has been a bit delayed because of our moving process, and we still technically aren't done, so bear with me a little bit, hopefully. So, yeah. Welcome back to the Schematic Mind Palace podcast. Hail Jove. Today, the day that I'm recording it is Thursday. Thursday is Jove's day. Jove, the Roman god of... it's not solidarity, but sovereignty. He is the god of sovereignty. Such that if you would like some assistance in your finances or other aspects of your life, he requires full responsibility of the self and of everyone else, because only then can you really be a sovereign individual, by not letting what happened to other people affect you. But yeah, so Hail Jove, Jovius Optimus Maximus, as our chant would say. In fact, since the hour I'm also recording is Jove's hour, based on where I am located currently. We'll do a little implementation of Jovius Optimus Maximus, 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 Max Maximus, Max Maximus. Maximus. Yeah, you only do it in increasing volume. We're in an Airbnb right now, so it can't be too loud. And we're here with this amazing fairy lights in the background. Reading to you the next chapter of Alan Watts' The Wisdom of Insecurity, a message for the age of anxiety. This question is, what is pain and time? Based on the second chapter of Pain and Time. At times, almost all of us envy the animals. Very true. They suffer and die, but they do not seem to make a problem of it. Their lives seem to have so few complications. They eat when they're hungry and sleep. Oh, Jesus. Excuse that. They eat when they are hungry and sleep when they are tired, which is actually a very Zen aspect. If anyone were to say, what is Zen? Like, what is the aspect of Zen? It would probably best be, when tired, sleep, when hungry, eat. And as such, being in that flow brings me back to the reason why I've decided to record my first podcast out in Florida on Thursday, on Jove's Day, because the entire reason why I'm even out here to begin with is thanks to Jove. I could say that me acquiring this job and this amazing opportunity to live out here in this amazing atmosphere with this just such a cool vibe. Like, I love the vibe out here in Florida. It's so chill yet energized. Like, everyone's active yet quiet. It's peculiar, but very exciting. But with so many weird things that happen, like let's say how much I'm making from this job, the perks of the job, the hours of this job, that seems completely out of left field from everything that I've heard from my friends and colleagues in the same field that I'm in, architecture, which actually, ironically enough, I'm not doing architecture per se, I'm actually doing landscape architecture, and my first day at this job is tomorrow. So I'm also recording this on my last day of freedom before I begin working that 9 to 5, but literally 9 to 5. And they made it clear they close the doors at 5, which is absurd in the design field. You're normally expected to go from 9 to 9 if you're lucky. So the fact that it is a hard 9 to 5, it's it's great. Hail Jove. What? This is amazing. I wouldn't say paganism is my religion, but in many ways, witchcraft is my religion. And I'm very happy to have such an incredible partner like the lunar goddess that you saw earlier to help push me through this experience of manipulating the aspects of our reality that we cannot disprove. Because that's the trickiest part of witchcraft, is that in many aspects similar to mathematics and botany and herbology, it was considered witchcraft originally because we didn't really understand it fully. But as we did, it fell further and further under the umbrella of science and mathematics. So I feel like I'm just continuing it as someone that used to be a mathematics major and a scientist of some sorts. I bring my jovial ionizer to this podcast, along with good old Alan. Let's turn you on, man. There we go. Here we go. Now we're starting the Alan Watts podcast. So, back to what I was saying before. They eat when they are hungry and sleep when they are tired. An instinct, rather than anxiety, seems to govern their few preparations for the future. As far as we can judge, every animal is so busy with what he is doing at the moment that it never enters his head to ask whether life has meaning or a future. For the animal, happiness consists in enjoying life in the immediate present, not in the assurance that there is a whole future of joys ahead of him. This is not just because the animal is a relatively insensitive clod. Often, though, his eyesight, his sense of hearing and smell are far more acute than ours, and one can hardly doubt that he enjoys his food and sleep immensely. Despite his acute senses, he has, however, a somewhat insensitive brain. It is more specialized than ours, for which reason he is a creature of habit. He is unable to reason and make abstractions, and has extremely limited powers of memory and prediction. Unquestionably, the sensitive human brain adds immeasurably to the richness of life. Yet for this we pay dearly, because the increase in overall sensitivity makes us peculiarly vulnerable. One can be less vulnerable by becoming less sensitive, more of a stone and less of a man, and so less capable of enjoyment. Sensitivity requires a high degree of buds and nerve endings, culminating in the highly delicate organism of the brain. These are not only soft and fragile, but also perishable. There seems to be no effective way of decreasing the delicacy and perishability of living tissue without also decreasing its vitality and sensitivity. Very cool. If we are to have intense pleasures, we must also be liable to intense pains. The pleasure we love and the pain we hate, but it seems impossible to have the former without the latter. Indeed, it looks as if the two must, in some way, alternate, for continuous pleasure is a stimulus that must either pale or be increased. And the increase will either harden the sense buds with its friction or turn into pain. A consistent diet of rich food either destroys the appetite or makes one sick. To the degree, then, that life is found good, death must be proportionately evil. The more we are able to love another person and to enjoy his company, the greater must our grief at his death or in separation. The further the power of consciousness ventures out into experience, the more is the price it must pay for its knowledge. It is understandable that we should sometimes ask whether life has gone too far in this direction, whether the game is worth the candle, and whether it might not be better to turn the course of evolution in the only other possible direction, backwards, to the relative peace of the animal, the vegetable, and the mineral. Interesting, like first, second, and third densities of consciousness. Or I guess the vegetable is in many ways an in-between of first and second density, but we can continue. It's similar to how pets and higher primates are sort of in between second and third densities of consciousness. Something of this kind is often attempted. There is the woman who, having suffered some deep emotional injury in love or marriage, vows never to let another man play on her feelings, assuming the role of the hard and bitter spinster. I love these old words. Almost more common is the sensitive boy who learns in school to encrust himself for life in the shell of the tough guy attitude. As an adult, he plays in self-defense the role of the Philistine, to whom all intellectual and emotional culture is womanish and sissy. Carried to its final extreme, the logical end of this type of reaction to life is suicide. The hard-bitten kind of person is always, as it were, a partial suicide. Some of himself is already dead. If, then, we are able to fully human and fully alive and aware, it seems that we must be willing to suffer for our pleasures. Without such willingness, there can be no growth in this intensity of consciousness. Yet, generally speaking, we are not willing, and it may be thought strange to suppose that we can be. For nature in us so rebels against pain that the very notion of willingness to put up with it beyond a certain point may appear impossible and meaningless. Under these circumstances, the life that we live is a contradiction and a conflict, because consciousness must involve both pleasure and pain. To strive for pleasure to the exclusion of pain is, in effect, to strive for the loss of consciousness, because such a loss in its principle is the same as death. This means that the more we struggle for life as pleasure, the more we are actually killing what we love. Indeed, this is the common attitude of man to so much that he loves, for the greater part of human activity is designed to make permanent those experiences and joys which are only lovable because they are changing. Music is a delight because of its rhythm and flow, yet the moment you arrest the flow and prolong the note or chord beyond its time, the rhythm is destroyed. because life is likewise a flowing process, changing, and death are its necessary parts. To work for their exclusion is to work against life. However, the simple experiencing of alternating pain and pleasure is by no means the heart of the human problem. The reason that we want life to mean something, that we seek God or eternal life, is not merely that we are trying to get away from an immediate experience of pain, nor is it for any such reason that we assume attitudes and roles as habits of perpetual self-defense. The real problem does not come from any momentary sensitivity to pain, but from our marvelous powers of memory and foresight. In short, from our consciousness of time itself. I had a little part at the end. For the animal to be happy, it is enough that this moment is enjoyable. But man is hardly satisfied with this at all. He is much more concerned to have enjoyable memories and expectations, especially the latter. With these assured, he can put up with an extremely miserable present. Without this assurance, he can be extremely miserable in the midst of immediate physical pleasure. Here is a person who knows that in 2 weeks' time he has to undergo a surgical operation. In the meantime, he is feeling no physical pain. He has plenty to eat. He is surrounded by friends and human affection. He is doing work that is normally of great interest to him. But his power to enjoy these things is taken away by constant dread. He is intensive to this immediate reality around him. His mind is preoccupied with something that is not yet here. It is not as if he were thinking about it in a practical way, trying to decide whether he should take the operation or not, making plans to take care of his family and his affairs as if he should die. These decisions have already been made. Rather, he is thinking about the operation in its entirely futile way, which both ruins his present enjoyment of life and contributes nothing to the solution of any problem. But he cannot help himself. This is the typical human problem. The object of dread may not be an operation in the immediate future. It may be the problem of next month's rent, of a threatened war or social disaster, of being able to save enough for old age, or of death at the last. This spoiler of the present may not even be a future dread. It may be something out of the present. It may be something out of the past, actually, of some memory of an injury, some crime or indiscretion which haunts the present with a sense of resentment or guilt. The power of memories and expectations is such that for most human beings, the past and the future are not as real, but more real than the present. The present cannot be lived happily unless the past has been cleared up and the future is bright with promise. There can be no doubt that the power to remember and predict, to make an ordered sequence out of a helter-skelter chaos of disconnected moments is a wonderful development of sensitivity. In a way, it is the achievement of the human brain, giving man the most extraordinary powers of survival and adaptation for life. But the way in which we generally use this power is apt to destroy all of its advantages. For it is of little use to us to be able to remember and predict if it makes us unable to live fully in the present. What is the use of planning to be able to eat next week unless I can really enjoy the meals when they come? If I am so busy planning how to eat next week that I cannot fully enjoy what I'm eating now, I will be in the same predicament when next week's meals become now. If my happiness in this moment consists largely in reviewing happy memories and expectations, I am but dimly aware of this present. I shall still be dimly aware of the present when the good things that I have been experiencing come to pass. For I shall have formed a habit of looking behind and ahead, making it difficult for me to attend to the here and now. If then my awareness of the past and future makes me less aware of the present, I must begin to wonder whether I am actually living in the real world. After all, the future is quite meaningless and unimportant unless sooner or later it is going to become the present. Thus, to plan for a future which is not going to become present is hardly more absurd than to plan for a future which, when it comes to me, will find me absent, looking fixedly over its shoulder instead of into its face. This kind of living in the fantasy of expectation rather than the reality of the present is the special trouble of those businessmen who live entirely to make money. So many people of wealth understand much more about making and saving money than about using and enjoying it. They fail to live because they're always preparing to live. Instead of earning a living, they're mostly earning and earning. And thus, when the time comes to relax, they're unable to do so. Many a successful man is bored and miserable when he retires and returns to his work only to prevent a younger man from taking his place. From still another point of view, the way in which we use memory and prediction makes us less rather than more adapt to life. If to enjoy even an enjoyable moment, we must have the assurance of a happy future. We are crying for the moon. We have no such assurance. The best predictions are still matters of probability rather than certainty. And to the best of our knowledge, every one of us is going to suffer and die. If then we cannot live happily without an assured future, we are certainly not adapted to living in the finite world where, despite the best plans, accidents will happen and where death comes at the end and in the beginning. Thus, then, is the human problem. There is a price to be paid for every increase in consciousness. We cannot be more sensitive to pleasure without being more sensitive to pain. By remembering the past, we can plan for the future, but the ability to plan for pleasure is offset by the ability to dread pain and to fear the unknown. Furthermore, the growth of an acute sense of the past and the future gives us the correspondingly dim sense of the present. In other words, we seem to reach a point where the advantages of being conscious are outweighed by its disadvantages, where extreme sensitivity makes us unadaptable. Under these circumstances, we feel in conflict with our own bodies and the world around them. And it is consoling to be able to think that this is the contradictory world. We are but strangers and pilgrims, for our desires are out of accord with anything that the finite world can offer. It might seem that our nature is not of this world, that our hearts are made not for the finite, but for the infinite. The discontent of our souls would appear to be the sign and seal of their divinity. But does the desire for something prove that the thing exists? We know that it does not necessarily do so at all. It may be consoling to think that we are citizens of another world than this, and that after our exile upon earth, we may return to the true home of our heart's desire. But if we are citizens of this world, and if there can be no final satisfaction of the soul's discontent, has not nature, in bringing forth man, made a serious mistake? For it would seem that in man, life is in hopeless conflict with itself. To be happy, we must have what we cannot have. In man, nature has conceived desires which is impossible to satisfy. To drink more fully for the fountain of pleasure, it has brought forth capacities which make man the more susceptible to pain. It has given us the power to control the future, but a little, the price of which the frustration of knowing that we must at last go down in defeat. If we find this absurd, this is only to say that nature has conceived intelligence in us to berate itself for absurdity. Consciousness seems to be nature's ingenious mode of self-torture. Of course, we do not want to think that this is true, but it would be easy to show that most reasoning to the contrary is but wishful thinking, nature's method of putting off suicide so that the idiocy can continue. Reasoning, then, is not enough. We must go deeper. We must look into this life, this nature, which has become aware within us, and find out whether it is really in conflict with itself, whether it actually desires the security and the painlessness which its individual forms can never enjoy. I'll repeat that last line again, because I feel like it is necessary. We must go deeper. We must look into this life, this nature, which has become aware within us, and find out whether it is really in conflict with itself, whether it actually desires the security and the painlessness which its individual forms can never enjoy. We must. But yes, no, this was another amazing chapter, another amazing question of what is pain and time. If I had to give my analysis of this chapter, it would be that while it is true that we seem to overemphasize the future and the past, it is not without reason. And maybe he'll bring this up later, but I haven't read it in that chapter, so I'll add my little 2 cents to it. And my own sort of, I guess, comings to reality, my own thoughts that have provoked me, have brought me to the recognition or the realization that we fixate on the past and the future because those two are the most expansive. Think about it. By the moment you started remembering things, you've already had years and years of memories built up, and even though at that early stage you weren't fully, like those memories weren't really crisp, you build on them until eventually you have this catalog of decades and decades of memories that will always be there. They might start to drift deeper and deeper into the recesses of your mind, but something so simple as a scent can pull them forth. And just as such, the future is even more expansive. If you're someone that daydreams, if you're someone that looks towards the future, you can craft an infinite number of realities that will likely never come to pass. And in fact, almost assuredly will never, ever, ever come to pass exactly how you want it to. Because in life, you never really get what you want, you get what you need. And as such, it makes sense that the struggles that we have in the past and the future are what we need. Because the one thing that the past and the future do not have, that the present does, is its resolution. Nothing in the past or the future can ever compare to the resolution of the present with whatever I decide to focus my attention on, whether it's this microphone, this ring, that ring, my hand, the camera. Everything is crisper than anything I could possibly imagine within my mind's eye. They might be very close. They might be very, very close to the crispness of the present. But they can never come close. They can't. So just as when he talked about the meals, how we prepare the meals a week in advance of what we should eat, meal prepping is always a good thing to do if you're in a good, healthy diet. You're preparing. You're like, oh, I'm so excited. I'm going to enjoy this all throughout the week. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be delicious. But because you're always thinking of the future, you can never fully appreciate the present. It's important to have that future preparation, but at the same time understand that the moment that you were eating that food, you are never going to imagine a food more delicious than the resolution of the food you're eating in that present moment. And perhaps that moment, you're eating terrible food. It's disgusting. Regardless, you are feeling that in the present for a reason. So ask yourself, why? Why am I feeling this pain and this time? Why? I'll leave that for next time. True Party King, signing off from the Schematic Mind Palace in Florida. Get hype. We might not be doing the recordings here in this amazing Airbnb fairy-like situation set up next time, but wherever we decide to do it, I'll make sure it's an amazing setup, an amazing experience, an amazing, crisp, crickety feeling. Florida's been amazing, and I couldn't have ever done it without the appreciation for the present, but also with my love and expectations of the future. So I'll see you guys around. Hail Jove. Jovius Optimus Maximus. Jovius Optimus Maximus. Jovius Optimus Maximus. Max Maximus. Max Maximus. Max Maximus.